Testing.
Today is Wednesday, March 29th, 2023, and we'll call the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m., starting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
That's why you're supposed to leave.
We will move ahead with school committee member introductions. The city council rep is excused absent tonight, so we'll start with member Beauplan.
Paul Beauplan, Ward 7 representative.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Megan Parks at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Agenda item number 3 is to receive and discuss budget with a potential budget approval vote, and the superintendent will present.
So kind of like we did last time, we left the potential approval on there because our timeline is ticking. I don't anticipate that tonight, given some recent news, but certainly the committee may think differently. Put together a memo with a lot of information on it for you today. And when I came into work this morning and we were fielding different questions about different news that had come up, decided to scrap it and take a whole different direction altogether. There's a bit of a roller coaster effect that's going on right now where it was announced, as I shared with you all last night, that the state had done some duplicate data entry in the mill calculation and in correcting that error, and it will have fluctuations for different communities and whatnot, but we will be receiving an additional $804,000 in state subsidy. What wasn't necessarily broadcast in a big way that we looked more into, which we found out about on late Monday, was a proposed rule change to chapter 101. And this proposed rule change, if it goes as proposed, would have a direct impact on districts like Lewiston in a very negative way. And so we have this $800,000, we could probably try to save some of the positions, at least have a conversation about it. But this other piece could cost us over $1 million. What the second piece is, and I just want to walk you through the pieces of it. This rule change, essentially what it means is the way in which we are billed for students who go to school out of district, which we've had a lot of conversation about. We get billed currently by days of attendance. So if a student can't go, refuses to go, has a bad day, gets sent out, things like that, we don't get charged. And so we prorate our budget built around that potential cost by day. This rule change would project as 100% of cost, regardless of whether or not the student attends. So all the conversations we've had the last couple of weeks about, is this a gamble? Could we reduce this amount because either there's not enough seats, or what we're thinking with the proration of the frequency at which kids go to school and or might miss. And so we tried to do a dance with those numbers and say, actuals, projections, amount of slots available, the labor shortage, and we proposed shrinking that. Now that wasn't adopted per se, but it was a pretty, I think, robust conversation, and people had mixed feelings each way. As I sit here today, if that rule moves forward, and the schedule for that is April 10th, a couple weeks away. If that rule moves forward, we're looking at $1 million+ that we have not budgeted for. I'm going to add to that by saying it's enacted immediately. So it's money from the current year that is not budgeted, that would have been approved almost a year ago. Superintendents are not very pleased with this message. We have an opportunity to testify and share our testimony with our thinking on how that could operate. Strictly from a budget perspective, this was a serious hit. I mean, when I talk about roller coaster, and I'll share more detail here, we've been on a roller coaster, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. Place where I don't know what might happen tomorrow as far as a message that comes out around funding. Hopefully nothing. But this April 10th piece is critical to our work. And I'll try to share a little more detail when we get there. Go ahead.
I just wanted a clarifying question here. So you're saying that if the students on our waiting list who don't have a place to go, we would have to pay the places that they can't go to for them not to go there?
These wouldn't be students on a waiting list. These are
Okay.
students that have been placed. So just a quick example, we had a student who attends a school down in Saco who made some pretty violent threats and committed some acts that are not appropriate. Now, while he doesn't attend Lewiston Public Schools, he's still ours, is from an enrollment perspective. So a decision was made so we could investigate that situation. That student would not attend school. Under this new rule, we would be paying for him to go to school no matter what. So the costs that were shared with you a while back that had the per pupil per day breakdown for special purpose private schools. Right now, if the student goes 4 days a week, we pay that invoice for those 4 days. This law change would be, or this rule change would be, we pay all 5 days, whether they're at school, homesick, what have you. I think the premise of it is not wrong. I think the financial premise of it is just really hard to swallow 3 weeks into public budget presentations and trying to make some really tough decisions. So the timing of it is really, really tricky.
Member Eames?
Is this something from the DOE or something that's going through the legislative process? And because you have a date of April 10th, so it can't be a legislative thing, right?
Yeah, and I probably should have gone more with the flow of the memo, but if you look at page 2, the big, I put it as the bad news and the big unknown. This is not a legislative bill process. This is a what they're calling an emergency edit to rulemaking, which allows them to have a 10-day window for input and make a decision.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So this is kind of like before your kids go to public school, before they can go to pre-K, you enroll them in daycare. And even if your kid's not there, you still have to pay. And even if you take a vacation, that you still have to pay. And even if they close down, you still have to pay. So that's the only thing I can compare it to. Is there a way for us, like in that situation where we have a student that something happened or whatever, is there a way to, I don't want to say like unenroll them, but is there a way to let, I understand the way I can understand them saying you have to pay because we're holding a spot for this child that then another child can't fill. But is there a way in those like unique circumstances that we could do something?
So we brainstormed some just different thoughts today because I want to submit some thoughts, at least from our side of the table. Right now, as it stands, special purpose private schools can discharge our kids for cause that they find. We don't get to say no. They get to discharge our kids. So if the student is, too absent or more of a challenge than they anticipated, or they don't have the staff, they can just say, these children don't come here anymore. We've never, because we know it's the right place for kids, taken that approach of we're going to unenroll them with you because they're not attending or things like that. Because we didn't have to. And I think what might happen as a result of this is if legal, we'll have to find out how we do that. So we'll have to then track attendance on our end to say, we have kids on a wait list, we're paying you, they're not coming. Can we take them out? Will that violate their IEP? And that whole cycle of cost. The other questions that came up included, we've had situations in which special purpose private schools have accepted our kids and said, we'll take them when staff is available. And right now, I think that that's fine. But if you're going to start charging us tuition for the kid that's not actually attending and it's on your accord, we're not going to be able to make those agreements. And so these costs are not insignificant. They're massive. Doing some rough math, we figured between 800 and $1.5 million in difference with this billing structure, if it happens. And we won't know until April 10th if it happens, if they don't delay it. I know a number of superintendents are very, very upset with this, especially due to the timing. So I'll go through the memo just to share some things. What I'm hopeful for tonight is to have a good sense from all of you. What's the number the school committee wants to move forward with? So right now, the request sits at $1.64 increase. And so to bring back to you any additional things or things you want to discuss, we need to know if that's the number. Or are you feeling it's too high, too low? Because that will dictate to us the things we try to bring back to you, or make sure we have costing around impacts. And I know a lot of work has gone into this process already. Believe it or not, it's already been over 3 weeks of budget presentations and working through things and reductions and all of that. Time is an important factor at this point. April 11th, we present to the city council. Usually by then we have a consensus around this table of what's that number that Jake will present to the city council. So we have another meeting on Monday, and that is labeled as adopt budget. We don't have a meeting between then and the city council presentation. We have some disciplinary things that I've shared with you, but we don't currently have another budget meeting between Monday. So today, Monday, and then city. So we want to do the best work we can between now and then. And I don't want to grind things to a halt, but at some point I'm going to look for direction. Can be at the end of the memo, but we really need to know how you want us to move forward.
Member Damon?
And I think this may be a question for Adam. If I recall correctly from last year, the school budget amounted to $10 and a few cents, $10.30 on the mill rate. And I'm just wondering, and that was on a $28 mill rate. I'm wondering if we go to this, if we add this 164, we're going to be around, right around $12. Is that it? Out of whatever they end up with? 12.6. We would be 12 because we're about 11 now. Out of basically a 30 plus mill rate. So we would be a third of, we would be responsible for a third of the mill rate when our budget is 2/3 of the total city budget, and we have 3 times the employees of the city side. Thank you.
For those watching the video or at home, Adam said it was 1260 is where we would be at, but he was off mic. Member Hurd.
Thank you. Is this schedule, the budget presentation at city council, is that because of their schedule? Like that's the only day that we could fit into their schedule? I'm just wondering if there is a way, and I feel like we've kind of been at a disadvantage because Linda has been out. Like I feel like we don't have a true feeling of what city council thinks or how they feel about the budget. And I didn't know if it was possible to meet with them or talk with them or have Linda present or just see how they're feeling. I just don't want to go into budget presentation at city council and them just be like, no. I would just rather have kind of like a feeling either way of like what they're thinking, if that's possible.
So that was the intention of the meeting, joint meeting we had with them last week, but we didn't receive a lot of feedback at that meeting, but that was the purpose of that one. I don't know that we would repeat that.
But that was the first time they were seeing our budget, correct?
They had binders in advance and I share the memos of the city administrator. This schedule is created with the city administrator to coordinate different components of their budget process. And so it's been happening for a long time. We coordinate the dates. The 11th does happen to be when they meet. And typically the superintendent will go in, excuse me, and present the budget that the school committee has adopted at that time. And if they don't approve it or have further comment at that point, we sometimes do more. Sometimes the committee will vote to say we want that to go to their vote. So this gets into that, the roles and responsibilities of the school committee, which differs from the roles and responsibility of the city council. And this is that water where we start to get into the place of the committee has decided this is what they want to put forth for students and education. And the city council has an opportunity to provide that feedback.
And any city councilor can email the superintendent or any of us their feedback and thoughts and opinions at any time as well.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't feel like and maybe last year I felt like we had more feedback. I don't know. I just feel like we haven't had a lot of and maybe that's just me personally. I just don't feel like there's been a lot of what's your feeling on this, or where are you temperature wise with the budget that we currently have, the work you guys have put in already. And I just don't want to go there on the 11th and them just annihilate us, I guess. I don't know. I'm not really saying it that way, but I just don't want to be blindsided. I don't want to walk in there and we feel really great about it. And then they're actually no.
It has happened in years past and we've had to do a back and forth with, I think it was before you were the superintendent, but we got everything together and then they voted it down and then we had to do more work, and that has happened. Member Bopalant?
Thank you. I remember from last year, there was some negative feedback on our initial presentation. And the city council ended the meeting and left. We had no feedback from them at all. I don't know if I want to interpret that as a sign of support, but we certainly would have heard from them, I'm sure, if they didn't like it. But I'm still looking, and again, regret that Linda is ill and wish her the best, but to see some comparative budgets from other aspects of the city government to make sure that we're in the ballpark and we're on the same playing field. Thank you.
I know that I have fielded the question about what's the percentage increase on teachers from this year to the proposed budget. And we were in and around 3%. And what I heard was PD was somewhere around 12+%. And so that was the only question I was asked. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback from city council this year. I welcome it. They've been good about asking questions. So.
Member Bowden?
That's close. Could we maybe just extend an invitation for them to come to our next meeting? Well, I know they can always come, but can we send them an email and invite them, please come to our next budget meeting just to listen and get up and speak in public comment if you have any questions or comments that might help.
Member Damon?
Is the proposed city budget available online? Do we know?
I don't know if it's online. I'm gonna assume it is. I know that I have a copy of their presentation binder, but it's in my office. And
Is it
at the
possible?
library.
Is it possible to share that?
Yeah, I can share it.
Might be helpful.
All right, so I say a little further down, and I know typical Jake started just chatting about the things that are happening, but I want to follow the memo here a bit and read some of the pieces here. It has been a fast few days. I have shared publicly that it's been a roller coaster. New information has come in. The information shared is concerning, and we have not had enough time realistically to communicate with all of you, to meet with our leadership team, calculate, prepare, and bring a level of detail that we'd be comfortable with as far as next steps are concerned. So I broke this down into good news and bad news, which I shared with you in part. Other good news is our insurance information. We at least got a cap number. It's not the final number. So the final number could be at the cap and it could reduce even further, but it came in at 6%. It's a 5% increase from last year. And I'm saying that out loud on purpose because while we projected a 12% increase, it's good to have that reduction, but last year it was under 1% and this year it's a 5% increase. So when we talk about a 3% budget increase, and that's a 5% cost itself, it helps express some of the challenges. The ED 279, which we talked about in great detail, I put $800,000 in here. It's actually 804,000. And the quote that was shared in a report to us, it said, "This week, the ongoing review identified a duplicative data entry in the algorithm that generates the funding estimates on the reports. This duplicative data entry inaccurately inflated the mill rate in preliminary reports. The department has removed the duplicative data entry and subsequent calculation produced a lower mill rate, 6.9%. That's a state number. This lower mill rate should mean more state funding for your local schools, thereby mitigating the amounts of funding needed from local property taxpayers." It was a $40+ million data catch. And as you can see, we received some additional funding. There were some other districts that also did, and the numbers vary, and it's based on the local mill rate that they give. So if you look at our ED 279, it doesn't say 6.9%. We have our own. We're 6 something now, but the initial one was 7.29 or something to that effect. And Bill and I and Adam, we're talking about today, we all remembered looking at that number thinking that doesn't match what they said to superintendents about the state valuation. And we didn't know if we should assume that that meant local. And lo and behold, it meant there was a glitch. Bad news, as I mentioned, is the rule changes, the emergency rule changes proposed for Muser. It's chapter 101. If you want to look it up, I can share a link with you too. So if you want to look at it, but we are looking at that at this point in time as the potential for, I put up to and including $1 million. We were trying to rough calculate today thinking number of kids enrolled, what if there were more spots, and we were charged every day. It's a hard number to just say. That's why I said between 800 and $1.5 million. It depends on how many kids can get placed, which we won't know till it happens, and the cost of those kids per day, which varies by school. Again, if you want to refer to that document we passed out earlier and start thinking about that daily cost, it's a significant shift. I have as a next up, looking again for some direction from the school committee so we can prepare the presentation for the city council and ultimately hoping for an adoption from the school committee itself. The challenge again we find is additional detail become available with updated information on. We'll get verified insurance rates probably in the next week or so. I don't imagine a huge amount of change there. State adjustments, if there are any more state adjustments, which there could be through legislation, which there could be through appropriations, those will be down the road. But then also rulemaking, which could take effect as early as April 10th, if that happens. On the next page, I just have some follow-up information from things that were asked about. We did get into a conversation about things like resources that are provided to our homeless students, store next door, things of that nature. I reached out to Jamie for just any tracking information that she had. She said they're still looking for a system to track. They haven't identified one yet, so they don't have that kind of data. She is happy to join you or join us, whether it's Monday or in the future, to speak to the work that they're doing. In this chart, you can see the total number of students that are identified through the McKinney-Vento program. And then sliding down, I just shared some information that I actually got from Jenny Derrigan, who's in our title grant work. And if you look at the way this is listed out, so Lewiston Public Schools has the responsibility to serve all identified McKinney students to the extent of the McKinney law. We do, however, go above and beyond by providing additional resources and support to all identified students and families within our school community. And below is a breakdown of current funding that is contributing to the program in some way. So we have it broken down as required and supplemental. So you can see the required components that are our district liaison position, which in our district is a full-time position. We have Title I homeless funds, and that's to purchase immediate needs. If a kid doesn't have shoes for school tomorrow, things like that, we try to accommodate those things. We do get funding through the McKinney-Vento grant. You can see 61,000 there, and we use that for transportation to students so they can stay in their home district whenever possible. We use that for professional learning so people know how to help identify and support students. We also have point of contact stipends. So each of our schools has someone that this is part of what they do as part of their day or later in the day. And so one example are staff that go out in the community, do outreach in the summer, staff who a family shows up and or there's a student is suspected to be homeless. So this point of contact will meet with that student and or the family and start gathering the information that we're required to gather to identify students. And again, to purchase immediate need items through the McKinney grant. It's on there twice because it's different pockets, but those are things we pay for. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Do you know how that 61,743 is calculated? Is it based on how many students are registered or identified, or what determines how much we get?
So that has actually changed. So the state of Maine gets an allotted amount of money, and then they allocate that money based on needs and numbers. That used to not be that way. That's a change. We used to just get a flat amount, and it was you had to apply and express your need. That has changed. So there is a formula based on past numbers and how many students we have serviced in the past. But 61,000 doesn't really do a whole lot for 205 students. I think that was what you were trying to say.
And it doesn't take into consideration the students who are homeless but aren't identified by McKinney-Vento. And there's a large population of that as well. Member Whitlow?
Thank you. You had mentioned a data tracking system for the store next door. Could you tell us what kind of data they're looking to track with that?
I know we've discussed in the past a way to track whether it's services provided or items that have come in, things that are going out, so we can track how many students are interfacing with the program, what supports are being provided, really for moments like this, so that we can say these are all the things that are happening, and that no data yet around that effort.
I mean, that could be easy as an Excel spreadsheet, right? Is that okay? I just want to make sure we weren't like thinking of purchasing some software system or something to track.
And then we have below that the supplemental items. And so these are currently things that are in the budget that are paid for, whether it's by way of state subsidy or local tax dollars. So we have our store next door, Longley Student Service Center positions, and we have different pockets of money. So when we get different pieces, some by rule you need to, and some we have just chosen in many cases to try to support students with the funds. So in the ESER 3 COVID grant, there was $450,000, and those were funds we chose to use to try to build up that space as a center, and that's the equivalent of the 450,000. So looks like ARP, it's ARP, it's the American Rescue Plan, and that's the part 1, part 2. And so those funds, there was a 3-year grant, and we used that for a district resource coordinator. You could see the note there. In ARP2, there was a 3-year grant for $79,000. And with that money, we've done summer outreach programs. We've provided case management services. And again, that purchase of immediate needs, because the other funds, as Karen said, it just doesn't cut it with that many students identified. And again, doesn't account the students that are not identified or refuse to be identified or can't be identified because of the criteria of McKinney. Next bullet down, we have the HYF District Homeless Youth Donation Fund of $6,000. And again, that's used for all immediate needs and expenses that the federal criteria won't allow for until it's gone. So that's just one to share more information around efforts that are both funded through things that are required through McKinney-Vento, which is law, and things that are supplemental that we are working to provide just to try to help the need.
Member Whitlow?
Thank you. The 3-year grants, are they sunsetting? Like, when are those up?
So the ARP 1 grant, I believe, is done at the end of this coming September. And then the ARP 2 funds are for the following September. So it will be another full school year. We have worked on projects and ideas to reallocate. So like you see that employee had resigned, that project was for that employee, the employee resigned. So we have been working on other options to spend those funds. But I believe we have another year with the ARP 2, and the ARP 1 will be through the summer and into the fall, and then it will sunset.
Does somebody have the total for the local amount, the student service center positions?
Yeah, we can get that for you in just a second.
Sorry, I'm reading my paper. I
Yeah, that's all right.
apologize. Go ahead, Ms. Eames.
So I'm trying to keep track of the store next door and the support we've been giving. And I have this in my brain, I have this memory of saying cutting 50,000, was that? And so I'm wondering, so we got these figures now. How do those things go together? Because I would hate to cut anything from this program, but I would like to hear how it relates to this.
Yep. And so really what I had proposed was a restructuring with the hopes that some grants that they're hoping to get will help cover cost of staff. It's a pretty unique relationship in that the store next door is a nonprofit. Yet we pay the executive director and an additional staff, actually and a half, because you all agreed that I had proposed and you said it would be okay to use 4 positions that were currently unfilled to reallocate to try to get more student supports in there. So that put it in concept at 6 people. 1 half-time position has been filled thus far. Of course, those funds are going to stop in this budget process unless something else is added. And then so really the restructuring piece was looking for where can we save dollars and keep people in the classroom. And the further up that list we got to the 3.9 million, the harder and harder it got to find. And so one idea was if we could trim that down a little, if they were able to get some grants to fund the position, I'm assuming the committee would continue to support use of space, heat, lights, and all that kind of stuff, which is needed for the program to have its home to function.
So let me follow. It sounds like you're saying that half position is the one that's currently there is going. I thought.
So the half position was only approved by you for the current year.
So for next year, we have.
We only had initially in our proposal, we had the coordinator position and the ed tech that works alongside.
Mhm.
Were the 2 things in the budget, and then throughout the reduction process, I included a $50,000 reduction,
Mhm.
which again, we would try to find other funds or they also can apply for funds to fill any gaps that they have.
So I don't think you quite answered the question, which was, so we have 2 full-time people, director at tech, and a half-time position that's disappearing?
So the halftime position, there were 4 positions you approved for this school year only.
But they don't have that. Right.
They have not filled 3 of them, and one of them wanted to come on, but could only do halftime at the
Mhm.
time. So we agreed to do that.
Yeah,
We didn't limit it to that. That's just what was asked for.
okay.
And so we agreed to that, but we did not include those positions that you had approved for this school year in the budget proposal for next school year.
Which means that this half-time position is disappearing.
Yes.
That was my question. So I thought we were talking about adding one, and we're actually talking about not adding half-time, but taking away a half-time. So instead of 3 positions with 4 people, there are now going to be 2 people and 2 positions.
And a restructuring of $50,000 of that.
So that's
Elimination of the halftime person that's there currently and a reduction of $50,000 from the program
in
altogether.
addition. Thank you. So I protest. I would really not vote for that. I hope that we can find a way to support it. Thanks.
Member Heard.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back for a second because I meant to write this down, but I didn't. And when you were talking about the 101, the money that we could potentially have to pay, the 800 to the, yep, that.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So I know, we've talked a little bit about, if we potentially had more space and if we had more staff and we could provide more services so that our students wouldn't have to go out. And I, Member Bowden and I were talking earlier in the week, just about space and that kind of stuff. And, we may be totally off, but did LPS or at any time fund like rehabbing or restructuring all of those classrooms at the Armory?
So back in 2000, I think it was 15, maybe 16, maybe in 14. I was still principal at the middle school, for what it's worth. The first year that was in existence and the construction started the year prior. So I want to say around 15. Construction started in 16. We had a program there. But yes, there was a significant investment in the Armory to the tune of about $110,000 of physical upgrades, classroom spaces, paint, network, wiring, safety things, even above the bleachers where you have the doors that you step into, those are firewalls, which didn't exist prior. Those had to be added to have classroom spaces up there. But yes, there was a significant investment.
And because we have made that investment, do we have rights or access to that space? I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that space being used during school hours for other things?
I would have to check with the rec, but I believe some of the spaces are used during the day for certain programming, definitely used after school for various programming. And they're working with, I believe, the Boys and Girls Club on a new program that actually started a few months ago, but they're utilizing spaces in those areas for that programming after school. I don't know what else there's. I just know that from community knowledge, not from talking to them.
Yeah. Okay. And again, Member Bowden and I were just kind of like brainstorming about like more space and like where do we have more space and do we have classrooms? And just when you were talking about potentially having to pay full time for students that maybe like going, it just jogged my memory, like maybe that if we had any rights or ability to use that space and if Kirsten could find more staff, is that a possibility that we could put, you know, some classrooms there in order to keep more of our students here, like locally?
So I think the answer is, I know the answer is yes, but I think I'm going to talk with my hands for a minute. Sorry. I really think that there's a balance here of the kids that are outplaced on this side and kids that we can provide for internally and building up the capacity here so that the number of kids going out goes down. But at some point, we're going to hit a threshold of we don't have space. If you go to a different space, you don't have an administrator. and those kinds of pieces. So how do we make sure that as we build this with the restructuring, that we're leaning ourselves towards being able to house more kids internally, even if we have to look at another space? If this cost thing happens through the state, it is like a fast forward on that thinking. I was thinking 2 or 3 years out from this budget, so like 26, 27. If we're looking at those kinds of adjustments to costs, it will force our hand to expedite, because it will be unsustainable in a hurry. So below the data we just shared about the different funding sources, there were some questions about the homeschool enrollment. And to date, we have, and we often see a spike late in the year for reasons you can imagine, but we have 159 this year. There were 223 last year, 221 the year before. But the year prior to that, I think is an important one, is 106. And I think the year prior to that, it was about that too. So it spiked during COVID, but then stayed higher. And again, maybe I should articulate it better. We sometimes see an increase in homeschool enrollments at the end of the year, when people start to look up and realize, well, it's spring and school's going to be done soon, and my child may or may not have done school this year, and they'll sign up for their children to be homeschooled and try to test out of a year. It's a pattern we sometimes see. Not to say that we will this year, but that number is up. Any kid being homeschooled, we do not get subsidy. They're not on our enrollment, even if they are living with us. And we have an answer to the question prior to, what does the staff cost us? So in the budget today, the cost of that staff is $155,990. And that's broken down as the coordinator at 93,000, the ed tech at 37 and change. And we have an actual for the halftime position of 25,600. Those are the store next door positions. So the coordinator 93, the ed tech 37, and then that part-time position 25. Yep, and that's $155,990.
And that's in not the budget that we're proposing, that's the current operating budget for right now, the 22-23 budget.
Correct.
Yes.
So do you also have what is proposed? Is it the exact same number, just minus 50,000 for the 23-24 budget?
So that's a different question. We can get you,
Sorry.
we can get you that number too.
I'm more
just-
visual, so seeing
Sure.
these numbers is more helpful for me.
And we can get you a copy of this and print it out for you.
Member Whitlow?
Quick question for you, Superintendent. Could you just remind the board of what part of that salary is benefits? Because it is a large amount, and I don't want people to hear that 93 and be like, oh my gosh, that person makes way too much money, right?
We can get that for you in just a minute also. So skipping down to superintendent agreements. This was a question that's come up. And so these are students that are, they've either come into our district from elsewhere for whatever reason, or they go elsewhere for whatever reason. The reasons can vary from, my parents work here and I drive my student. It could vary from, my daycare is in Auburn, so I want my kid to go to Auburn. Those kinds of things. So we have 278 total agreements. Of those, we have 75 students that come to Lewiston on agreement, 203 students that go outside of Lewiston on agreement. And you can see the breakdown that 98 is to Auburn, 25 to Lisbon, 27 to RSU4, which is Oak Hill, and 11 to 52, which is Levitt. The remaining schools are single digits. And to try to capture the rationale for each of these situations, every single one of them is pretty unique. And we work with area superintendents to just try to do the right thing for the family wherever we can. Although I think this year, because of enrollments and challenges with subsidy, there's going to be more scrutiny by all superintendents in our area to keep their kids at home.
Member Boland?
Thank you. Jake, any explanation why it's so lopsided? 75 coming to and 203 leaving?
They're all situational. I think that the number of students that go elsewhere, a lot of have to do with employees. And so if a teacher works in that district, and because there's those area districts, I can look at the rationale and the reasons, but we get the same unique rationales for kids to come to us as we see requests to go elsewhere. There are some that we have challenged and some that we deny because they don't add up. We also sometimes see things like we hear that a family is moving to Auburn and they apply to go to school there and they haven't moved yet. And so there's different pieces. We're also mindful of things like athletics because there's an MPA waiver process for that too. But we are seeing some housing challenges in Lewiston, and Auburn is growing in their housing availability. So we have some people who here either can't find housing or make a transition in housing, and there's no options in Lewiston. So they're moving, and we get a lot of requests for students to finish the year where they were, or to complete their high school years because they've been going to school there all their life kind of stuff.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So kind of going back to the homeschool numbers, and just what we're seeing for enrollment, those are all, we're not getting subsidy for those students that are choosing to homeschool. And so I'm hoping Member Eames has like more information as we're coming up on like stuff that's going on at the State House, as I did see an article that came out just recently that the Maine education chief had said that, and I quote, academic learning will take a back seat to social emotional learning and that kind of stuff. And as a parent, as a student who attends public school, not that I think social emotional learning is any less important as what we're learning in the classroom, but at a state level, if those types of things are being handed down, there's really nothing that we can do at a local level when it comes to our curriculum and those types of things, if like that's what they're pushing through. So it's concerning that those are talks that are happening at the state level, because as a parent, of course, I want my children, both of my children to learn to read and writing and arithmetic and math, and all of those things are very, very important. So I think hopefully Member Eames can, like whatever's going on at the State House and like what they're talking about and things that are being put into place, that we can find more into that, because I don't want to see that homeschool number continue to rise, because that's just more money that we're going to have to raise at a local level. And more that taxpayers are going to have to pay at a local level if those continue to rise. And I do know of a lot of like local home co-ops and stuff that are just growing. They're pulling teachers from public schools to teach in their home co-ops. So it's just concerning to me that obviously during COVID, those numbers are, understandable, but that it's going from 106 to 159 is concerning. From a budget perspective, where we're talking about budgets, that's money that we won't be receiving from the state.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And homeschooling, there's a whole plethora of reasons why people choose to homeschool. One interesting note that I want to make sure people hear from a homeschooling perspective, folks who live here, whether they homeschool or send their kids to school, they have a property tax bill likely. And so they're contributing to the school cost. And so the homeschooling piece is an interesting one in that I have big feelings about kids that should have the Lewiston schooling experience. I think it's highly valuable. I'll say that till the end of time. I send my kids to school every day. I love their experience. And I think that there's a passion, there's something about, especially when you get up to the camaraderie at the high school level, there's something about being part of something bigger than you. And I think it's extremely important. The number of pathways and opportunities that we provide our students in Lewiston because of the size of our system are vastly different than what others can even try to provide. So maybe it's just a little plug, but I think that some of the things that our schools are offering are not necessarily on people's radar. But the reason for homeschooling can be those pods. It can be and extreme social anxiety, kids who can't thrive in an environment that has so many kids, and the whole range in between. So we are curious why it's up, and we'll see what the trend looks like as the years move forward.
Member Eames?
Yeah, I think you named me because I volunteered to be the representative, the liaison to the delegates. So I will inquire and see what I can find out. I hadn't heard whatever you were talking about social emotional learning, but I don't see how social emotional learning and academics balance off against each other, especially in the homeschooling data. But anyway, I will pursue that and see what you're referring to.
You can share the article with her, because I know you posted it on your Facebook and I read it.
Okay, I didn't see it. So, okay. I don't know what to say, but I will inquire.
And I've got some numbers connected to the store next door staff costs. And so the current salary of the coordinator is $67,163. And the proposed budget includes a total cost of $97,028, with $69,178 being salary. For the ed tech role, budgeted $41,372, with $26,450 being salary.
Wait, say that number again. Sorry, I can't keep up
Yep.
with you.
The ed tech is $41,372 budgeted. Salary being $26,450, for a total of $138,400. $67,163 is the current salary. And next year that would move to a projected $69,178.
And the total amount for the store next door from the local budget for the 23-24 proposed is the 138.4. Oh, minus 50 off of that 138,
Right. 138.4,
So-
and it would be minus 50
88.4.
if adopted.
I have other questions on what you were just talking about. Is that, are you ready for, with the superintendent agreements, does this take into consideration anywhere the kids that are covered under McKinney-Vento that might be living out of district now and still coming to Lewiston, or vice versa?
No, those are calculated separately. Unless a student wants to stay at the new school and they still live here, or vice versa. So McKinney covers them. There's like a school choice piece. So hypothetically, let's say a student moves to Cumberland with someone that can take them in at the time. Or it's a situation that works for them because they can't be in Lewiston. They have protections under McKinney-Vento, and we try to arrange for rides for them to get from Cumberland to Lewiston so they can maintain their education where they otherwise would have. That's not a superintendent agreement. That just qualifies as McKinney-Vento.
So Lewiston would still continue to get those subsidies? If they were living out of Lewiston but attending Lewiston, that doesn't change the subsidy at all, right?
Correct. That it counts as our enrollment number. So yes.
And the reverse, if they started the school year here in Lewiston, but then the family had to move and now they're going to school somewhere else, do we then lose the subsidy or no?
Depending on the time of year, it does get factored as
Okay.
the fluctuations happen throughout the year, but they use the October 1 and the April 1 number to
Okay,
generate their averages. So it does have an impact when students leave before October 1 and return after April 1, if that makes sense. It's kind of a split.
and then on all of these 278 total, the subsidy follows those students regardless of where they're going?
So typically, but only if it falls within those windows. So we do try to sign them, and there's language in the law that it's for the year. There's some criteria that families are asked to follow. We don't provide transportation. We have expectations on academics and attendance and things like that. And if they violate those, you could rescind. But where they go to school for their enrollment for that October 1 and April 1 piece is factored into the total enrollment.
And then my last question on this is, like Maine Connections Academy, Acadia Academy, are those considered in this 278?
No, those are just straight enrollments. They've chosen to go elsewhere. Same thing with like St. Dom's. They're not ours. We are in part a fiscal agent for St. Dom's through certain subsidies, but that's a state requirement. But this doesn't count those students.
Okay.
They're just enrolled elsewhere. Same thing with like a NYA or a Hebron.
Right.
Those students they just go. And some of that factors into our total enrollment. And I know that some families have made that choice for multiple reasons, including sports, but those students are not our enrollment or our subsidy.
Thank you.
So given the roller coaster we've had the last few days, and having got to the memo, I just want to open up for questions, thoughts. Really would love to have a pulse on that $1.64 number. There are things that we can present to the city. In my experience, it's always been heavy on the tax impact and the numbers. The city does not have oversight on what you choose to spend the money on. And so I'm open to all kinds of conversation about what people feel should be in or out. Anything around, I really want it in and I don't want to cut anything, the 164 goes up. Anything around, I think we should reduce that or keep it as a reduction, the 164 goes down. The 164 assumes the $3.9 million in reductions. So if we pull from those reductions, again, that's going to impact the money.
The 1.64 includes the additional 800,000 that we just learned about and the potential reduction from the insurance adjustment, or no?
It does not, and that's an important thing to note. And so the insurance adjustment, I actually asked Adam to hold off for now because we were getting this flurry of news about the subsidy and then the not so pleasant news about the potential thing on April 10th. So to that end, if you look at it, the change in the insurance rate, if it were to stay in, would pay for the additional cost, or the recommendation I had to reduce the tuition, which some people felt like should stay in. And so that could be an offset, if you will. Because the news was late last night and digested somewhat this morning with this chapter 101, I didn't have the time to meet with our folks to say what's your thoughts on what we should do with this from a leadership team perspective, and bring that to you in a sound way.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. So thank you for the memo. It's, thoughtful. I see all the work you put into this, trying to answer our questions. But you didn't answer my question from last week on administration costs and if there's any way to cut those down. So I just wanted to see if you had dug into that. If not, it's okay. Next time, but I just wanted to ask.
We've started our digging, but that is something I want to bring back to you if I can.
I spoke with Linda before the meeting. Obviously, she didn't have this memo, so she may feel differently after she watches this video tonight. But as of the conversation earlier with just the 800,000 potential, the 800,000 coming back into Lewiston, she had said that she would like to see at least some of the $500,000 for special ed returned to the budget. In regards to the store next door, if possible, keeping the 50,000 in, but setting up like a deadline for a transition plan for the store next door to take over some of the bring some of their funding in-house through grants or whatever. And then the other thing we haven't talked about, so I won't talk about that. And then from my perspective, I think that soliciting some feedback from city councilors, if they're willing to give it, on what dollar amount they're comfortable with or what percentage they're comfortable with. Because like you said, they have no say in where the money goes, just what the bottom line is. So if they would say, okay, we're good with the 164, or we want that lowered by 15 cents or something along those lines, that would give us some guidance for how we should move forward. Member Whitlow.
Could you remind us again how much of the fund balance that we're putting towards this budget?
In the revenue sheet, we have $5 million this year of fund balance use. And just as a reminder too, one of the things that we continue to talk with legal about the official process, but to build a reserve with some of the other fund balance, with the idea that if we have this extremely lean budget, which this is, if something pops up, we would have a place to go potentially to cover it.
Can you remind us what the total fund balance is right now?
Unaccounted for currently, it's around 10 million. Shouldn't say unaccounted for, that's the wrong term. Unencumbered or available, really. The other funds have specific criteria and or have been already pledged to be spent in a specific way, like grants and things like that.
Member Damon?
If I recall correctly too, from our discussion with Ms. Hunter, every penny on the mill rate equates to about $22,000 in cost.
That's correct.
So if we cut a dime, that's $250,000 more or less.
Yes.
Any other input from the committee? Member Whitlow? Sorry.
I feel the same way that Ms. Eames does about cutting that $50,000. I don't feel good about it. You know, I think as a board over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, it's been very important to us to grow the store next door to support our homeless students. And then we're pulling the rug out from under them. And I don't feel good about that. And it's just gonna fail if we continue to do that. We know that there is shortage housing, which I don't know if that is part of why the homeless, the numbers are where they're at. I'm sure it contributes to a little bit. So I just don't think this is the time to pull that. And I think what Ms. Park said that Ms. Scott had suggested, maybe we give them a deadline. I think that to transition is the better way to go. But I don't think that we should be expressing any thoughts of not supporting the store next door.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. I guess if we're just talking about how we're feeling about the budget, I think I'm feeling frustrated in that, you know, we're trying to reduce it to a certain amount. You know, there's been a lot of behind the scenes work by you guys to come up with like feasible ideas that aren't going to be like devastating necessarily. And what I'm hearing from my fellow members is, I don't want to cut this. I don't want to cut this. I don't want to cut this. And I understand the reasoning behind it, but we're not hearing other suggestions of where we can cut. And so to me, I'm just watching that amount continue to rise back up, creep back up. And I just don't know how we're going to do this. My gut tells me that city council is not going to like this number that we bring to them. And, you know, I got a little feedback from one of the city councilors, and basically our last meeting that we had with them, they felt like we took over the meeting with all of our questions and comments, and they really didn't have a chance to ask too many questions, or maybe they didn't know what questions to ask at the time. So, you know, I'm going to echo what Member Hurd said. Like, I think it's important that we kind of gauge where they're at before we go to them with our budget and say, hey, this is it. And they're like, absolutely not. Like, you're $1 million or $2 million over what we want you to be. Like, we kind of need to know that. And we got to give a little. Like, I just keep hearing, let's not take this away. Let's not take this away. I'm not comfortable with this, but where else are we going to take it from? And so I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Member Medina?
Thank you. I also wanted to advocate to keep the $50,000 for the store next door. I mean, I've seen all the work that Joel and Jamie both do, and it's a lot. And just having that half support right there for half the time is so important. And I also wanted to talk about some of the SEL positions. I was in a Zoom meeting recently, the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey. They were talking about some of the information they got out of that. And some of the stuff that they said was that 1 in 2 high school girls are experiencing depression. 1 in 10 girls have had suicide thoughts. And this was done in September of 2022. So with suicide on the rise, I just think it's really, really important to have as much supports as we can for our youth. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. It's really important.
Member Hurd and then Member Beaumont.
Thank you. So I think a little bit, kind of what Member Bowden said is that you guys have done a lot of the work and you've come to us with cuts, and I feel like some people aren't comfortable with that, and that's fine. Do I think that our store next door doesn't do important work and that what they're doing for our students is any less valuable than what our teachers are doing in the classroom every day? Obviously not. But I do also think that and I don't know the conversation that was had with the store next door, but I believe, just from the type of person that you are, Jake, that it was communicated that at some point the store next door was going to have to go out on their own and they were going to have to go find funding on their own. And so I think that has been made clear to them. And so of course we would love to fund them fully for as long as we can. Possibly can, but I think at some point too, as a nonprofit, they have to take on that responsibility and go and get the funding and kind of become their own entity on their own. So again, not that I think that any of the work that they do is less important, but I think that if we're looking for someplace to cut, and if they do have the ability to go out and get grants or funds or whatever they can get on their own, then if it means taking a little bit away from them to give them a little bit more of a push to go out and do that, then I think that we need to, because there are no other options for us to go out and get grants or find other funding for that money. And they have other avenues. So I think that they do need to look into those other avenues. I also think that, I obviously am a taxpayer. I don't want to have to pay more in my taxes, but I also know that our teachers are working with the bare minimum here. And so I think that we also need to think about that. We had all the admins from our schools up here talking about what they answered my question when I said, what do you need, or how can we help, or what can we do to help you if there's a shortfall in your school or whatnot. And they all echoed the same thing that Member Medina was saying, was those SEL positions that they have that are really helping students. And so we need to be thinking in the future, because the money that is funding those positions is going to sunset. So how, if those are detrimental to our schools, which it sounds like it is, how are we going to fund those? And I know it's hard questions. It's money, and we're talking about people, but we're also, again, and I've said this before, we're in the business of educating our students. And so that's what we have to do. That's our job. And so do I want to pay more in taxes? No, of course I don't want to pay more in taxes, but I also want to make sure that our students are educated to the best of their ability. And I think that that's our responsibility. So if it means making those hard decisions and cutting a little bit from places where, of course, we don't want to, but if we think that we can, because they can do it on their own, then I think we do need to look at that very seriously. Thank you.
Member Beaumont.
Thank you. I walked in the door here debating with myself how I felt about the budget, and I firmly believe that Jake and his staff have put together a good working budget. If we want to add money back to the store next door, which I would sign on for, I haven't found a place where we can cut $50,000. That was Jake's original challenge. And then thankfully, I've had a little bit of a shift because Assistant Superintendent Paquette sent me the city budget. And it was very rude to skim and to listen, and I don't multitask well. So I will go on record. If I'm wrong on this, I will apologize. But one of the city department wants to add an administrator for $183,000. The police department budget is astronomical, and we don't even debate the frontline workers and they're needed and everything else. But we also looked at the fact that our teachers are frontline workers and they're darn as important as anybody else. So, you know, it might be a Pythian sword or whatever, as I've said before, only a fool will fight a battle he can't win. But I really feel that I don't know why we should have to take it on the chin when there are others. I'm not saying there's a lot of fat anywhere, but this may not be the time to add another administrator in another department for $180,000 when we're looking and spending a valuable time, and it's valuable time and it's worth it, over a piddling 50,000 compared to that. So I'm madder than a wet hen, but I'm not focused in my direction yet. But I'm the legitimacy of our budget, the legitimacy of what we do in the classroom. I don't want to take up any time. I'll study it Monday. Dr. Eames and myself visited a classroom. We see the wonderful things going on. These teachers are worth every cent. Many of them. There are, you know, weak ones everywhere. I don't want to overgeneralize. Every darn cent that they're paid. And I just think we have to fight for our own legitimacy on this. Thank you.
Prior to, I don't remember if it was 2019 or 2020, when we brought when we voted on a salary for the store next door position. Can you tell us how that program, how it was funded prior to that? Because it's only been funded at the local level for, was it 2 years ago that we voted on that? 2020. So prior to the last couple of years, how was that funded?
So we actually, the person who was overseeing the store next door was also our McKinney-Vento liaison for only the high school at the time. The job was different, and we had a district person serving as the second half of that liaison position. So the decision was made after a retirement, which was a couple of years ago, to take that position, that liaison position, out of just the high school and make that position a district position to serve all students as it related to the McKinney-Vento. The store next door responsibilities were a choice of that liaison to keep that going and to give extra time and to do those things. So it wasn't a position that was funded and paid for as a store next door employee. It was a Lewiston Public School employee who was hired to do another position and was taking on some of those responsibilities because they felt it was an important thing for them to do to serve the students.
And so happens that the current coordinator was providing case management services in an office 2 steps away, who would also contribute where they could to keeping the store next door piece afloat. So it wasn't really a budget item before that prior.
So we've only really been funding money into the store next door for the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Thank you. Member Medina?
I just have a question. If they were apply for a grant to fund these positions, would those come into effect by the next school year, or is that something that's going to take like more time?
So this is the challenge that I have. So when certain things come up, I'm not in charge or run the nonprofit, and I don't have say there. There's someone in the audience here that might have some say as a member of their board. So we kind of live in both worlds, and so I don't know what grants have been applied for per se. I've heard some things, but I wouldn't necessarily know, I guess is my point. And so as far as the timeline for release of grant funds or for the duration of them, they vary greatly, as you will know, but I don't know what grants have been applied to or what the time frame would be on them. I did hear about one that was connected to the city, and there was some prospective movement on that. Even that became complicated in a sense because there was questions around, is this money going to the school department? And the answer was no, because it's not the school department. They kind of live in that space in Longley, but those funds would not come to us. We're not their fiscal agent.
And just kind of following up on the point I was making before that we've only been funding anything with the store next door for a couple of years. What year did the store next door start? It's been like 17 years or something.
Yeah, it's been going a long time. And I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying her name, but Mary Seaman did an amazing job of supporting kids for a very, very long time. I think I can remember back when I was teaching at the high school level. So it's been at least 15 years. And she did a lot of grant writing and a lot of acquiring of donations and just doing a lot of goodwill for kids. But no, it wasn't funded until we had that transition. It was like, we wanted to support that, but how do we support that without making a commitment to it?
Thank you. Member Whitlow?
So you mentioned that there's 10 million in the fund balance. So it's my understanding from years past budgets that if we can't get the city council to accept what we want for a budget, that there's always the possibility we could use more of our fund balance to support our budget. I mean, not that we want to, because we want to keep that there, but if there is 10 million there and we feel strongly about $50,000 in our budget, could we make that happen?
Yeah, the committee can absolutely make a decision to use more fund balance. While the 10 that sits there using 5 will bring it to 5. If we use 6, we'll have 4. And then next year we'll be $2 million short. Of course, we still have this year's audit process that hasn't happened yet. So that fund balance is a constant moving piece. My biggest fear with additional fund balance, and not that you can't, my biggest fear with fund balance is that second year. Do we have the fund balance to start where we started this year? And anything we don't, we're going to have to find a way to either make up, or that will be an instant reduction. What happened this year, if we had no fund balance, we'd be trying to cut $12-13 million. And that's a really scary factor for me.
I'm trying again, visualizing. So we had this conversation 2 budget cycles ago, I think it was. We used 5 million of the fund balance, but that was, we had 5 million, or we had 7 million, but we used 5, I think it was. And that was because the reason we had that much was because of unfilled positions, I think from the pandemic or leading up to the pandemic. And then that's why we have so much now. I don't know how to word what I'm trying to ask. So this year, the current budget's unfilled positions, will that go into next year's fund balance?
So yeah, unspent funds from this year will go into next year.
It's not already accounted in that 10 million.
Right.
Okay.
It's got that delay to it in the cycle, but I will note that we are filling positions, and while we've had much less, yes, that will carry over. But we can't become dependent on that if
Right.
we're also reducing by, I think, 61 positions in the reductions now, and the 17 or 13 that we had last year that we didn't reallocate as far as that restructuring with special ed. So again, that's over 78 positions that we've reduced in a 2-year swing. So those fund balance pieces that occurred then are not going to occur in the future. The positions don't exist to even be unfilled in the budget. And part of that gets exacerbated by, well, then why does the cost go up? Well, the cost goes up because people get their increase in their compensation, which is negotiated. People get, well, you saw the insurance costs went up again a little bit. Cap is 6, but again, that's 5% more than last year. So those things just kind of happen.
Member Heard.
Thank you. I also too want to remind everybody that we also have all those nursing positions that we currently have that are ESER fund, or however you say it,
So
that are sunsetting.
we're waiting for more of this conversation to happen, because right now we have 2 nurse positions that are sunsetting this year, unless we find an allocation for them. It's one of the things that's pretty high on my list of, if the money changes, that we want to put back. There's a lot of things on that list, including substance abuse counselor addition at the high school, including SAL positions that the principals and directors really want back, and they want in their actual budgets. So we have a list of things that we know administration supports, and there's clearly need right now, where they're not in your memo, because I don't foresee the funds unless you say we want to do $1.80 and come back to us Monday with how you think we should best spend that. But
So, I'm sorry, for the nurses positions, we have 2 positions that will not be returning in the fall. Currently, is what you're telling me.
as it sits right now, unless we add them to the general fund, they sunset. 2 of the 3 Easter positions.
So I know I had asked last meeting, like, what does that look like for us? And I think the example I gave was something that they had put in the email, as in, like, there are certain medications or certain things that can only be administered by a nurse. And if a nurse calls out and there's not someone to cover them, but the student needs it and we administer it and something happens, like, where are we legally as a district? Like, where does that fall? Whose responsibility is that? Like, are we setting ourselves up for not good things?
We would work to cover it with the 2 existing floaters that we have. But certainly those shortfalls they're going to be a challenge.
Member Damon?
These this budget, I think, is probably one of the toughest we've seen. This is my 4th budget on the board. The first one was definitely atypical because COVID was just really taking off and everything was in flux. Having spent 17 months along with Ms. Whitlow and Sue and Bill trying to negotiate with our teachers, I feel that we were incredibly diligent in trying to hold the line as best we could, but yet recognize that the teachers are suffering from the same inflationary pressures that we all are. I've heard some folks around say, well, they're teachers, they're not first responders. Well, I disagree. How many city employees 5 days a week are having direct face-to-face contact on a first name basis as a first responder to our citizens? Whether they're 4 years old or 40 years old, they're still citizens of the city of Lewiston. And we have a responsibility, a duty to help them make the best of their lives that they can. To think that teachers wouldn't be considered first responders, and particularly when we get into the social work folks and the counseling and all that, it is just, to me, it just smacks of some type of egotistical bias. Teachers they're what's going to make the future for this city. And we need to make sure that we fight for them. Part of our job here is, yes, we have to protect we have to be responsible with how we spend the dollars. But being responsible for it also means doing the job and getting the job done. The 3 or 4% increase that we're proposing, includes a tremendous number of not only benefit, but a salary. 70 some odd % of our budget is salary. So it's, it's a huge piece of work. And I know we're going to see next year, we're going to be back negotiating those teachers' contracts again. We have several other contracts we're going to be negotiating this year, which are going to increase costs. If we don't really fight for the dollars we have now, going forward, it's not going to be achievable at all. We have to sustain where we're at because we have contractual agreements. We have contract, agreements with the teachers union and the ed techs and the administrators and the salary, the food people, all of them across the board. We cannot break those contracts. We've agreed to those. We have to live with that. That's just like debt service. There's no getting around it. It's increasing, it's going to increase, and it's going to have to be covered. If you read the newspaper at all, most districts are looking at anywhere from 8 to 8 to 13% increases in their budgets. And it's going to hurt and it's going to be tough, but we have to fight to sell it because we owe that to the people that we represent. We owe that to the kids. We owe that to the community to make sure that we get the resources we need to educate our kids. And remember, we see these kids 1,300 hours a year. The other 7,000 plus hours out of a year, we have no control over the trauma and drama that these kids are going through. Our people are the front line of trying to hold that together for many of these kids. And it goes all the way down to the food service worker. The food service worker that serves those kids breakfast first thing in the morning, that may be the most positive thing that's happened to that kid in the last 24 hours. And I think we have to make sure that we can provide that and provide that well.
Member Heard?
Thank you. I had a follow-up to the question I asked previously. Can you get us a total of what it would cost for those two positions that we're losing, like benefits, salary, all of like what that would entail?
For the nurses? Yeah. we
Yes,
can get
please.
that for you. Yeah. That, we can bring that back Monday. I don't know if we have that right now.
Are there any other questions or comments before I open it up to the public? Would any members of the public like to speak? Yeah, go ahead.
And not that this is anything against Ron, but for public comment, do we, like, I know in our agenda, normally it says like public comment, it must be 3 minutes, you know what I mean? I just want to make sure we're being like across the board, like is it different for budget? Is it different if it's not public session? Is it, I'm just asking just because I know that's usually like what happens, but.
Yeah, for regular meetings, that's like controlling the flow of a full agenda. I don't know that that's, I mean, if he talks for 45 minutes, I'm going to stop him, but I think for budget, it's I think that's more traditional for the full agendas.
It might be easy because I'm just going to go right to the point. Number one, when we developed the Longley Outreach Center 3 years ago, the intent was that it was going to be a school department operation with school department employees. We never had any discussion about a third party taking over billing positions. Number two, none of us in the store next door are aware of any effort that we're going to take on employees and support this. Number one, we're not in a position to do that. Number two, we're too young of an organization. There are many pieces, as we found out during the grant process, that we are lacking, that we're still working on. The amount of some of these grants are just phenomenal. I mean, what they require, 22 different requirements that put us over $100,000 just to make it happen. And we're going to get what, an extra 20,000 out of all that effort? And now we have employees. 3 years ago, the intent was that the school department had a significant need of taking care of their homeless and that the Longley building was available to do that. And the director was hired, the coordinator for homelessness was hired to coordinate that effort and to expand what has stemmed from the school department's store next door effort. And our workshops that we had in our ad hoc committee, we talked about staffing at a certain level. At no point were we ever talking about third-party staffing. It was about school department staffing because it is a school department need to improve the education of these kids. The store next door was relegated into a financial mechanism for fundraising purposes and for purchasing purposes for the kids. Period. And that's what we've done. You know, $45,000 worth of effort, and all of that money goes to the kids. Take care of them. We do not run administrative cost. There was never any intention of any of us to run administrative cost. It was always our understanding that the director and the 3 employees were going to be school department employees. So I can't tell you how far off the page we are and what's being discussed tonight and where we sit. We don't, right now, we don't have a board that can agree to this. So in terms of, you know, the question that was asked earlier, where we are on our grants. Yes, I mean, we might have something in the 10,000, 20,000 range. We're nowhere near being able to assume $50,000 in cost. If you want this to work, you need to give this more time. We have done so much progress over two years with limited resourcing that we need to at least keep this going. Now, well, could it change? Possibly. I'm just saying right now, we had no intention of assuming any of that responsibility. Our sole focus is the supplies and the resources for those kids. And that the employees in the facility of Longley were a school department initiative. And I know that one because I'm the one that proposed it. And that's the way I proposed it 3 years ago. And I don't know how it morphed out of that. But I just ask that you take a look at the priority. Should this be a school department priority to have that center and to have school department employees working with these homeless kids? Of which you see the population there, and that's not even including all of them. And 2, allow the store next door to continue to grow. We've certainly grown in the past 2 years, but we're not at the level that everybody wants us to be. And our mission, I mean, we're going to have to address the mission. Our mission is to provide the supports and resources to the students. Not hire employees and take over expenses from the school department. That was never the mission. That was never the incorporation. So we have some work to do. And I'm hoping that when all is said and done, you guys can reflect that, okay, maybe we're not at the point in time that we would want to be. And then still this homeless population is still a high priority that the school department needs to do regardless of the involvement of the store next door. And I hope you can get to that point and allow the store next door to grow, to continued growth, to get to a point where we might be able to make an impact, but we can't do it this year. And if you begin to dissolve that this year, it's going to be like an Alka-Seltzer tablet. It's going to be one large tablet that's going to start to deteriorate, fade away till there's nothing left. And that's my biggest fear right now. If we go down this road with this 50,000, I just found out that part-time position is going away in June 1st. I didn't even know that. And so you're going to have 2 people trying to take care of attempting to find $50,000 and taking care of 300 homeless students in 2 facilities and making sure that they're all set. Not to mention the fact they're taking care of the families because now it's a district-wide effort, not a high school effort anymore. So we don't have just the little ones. We've got the parents that go with it. And no one's being realistic about the need and what's happening down there. And Ms. Ames, I am so thankful you came in today for a tour and the education of the history of the facility and so forth. And I'm hoping that helped to clarify. And I'm hoping, and several of you already know about it, but the others, I'm hoping that we can connect and you can get more detail in terms of it. You know, I think the intention would be to do the right thing, to be able to help the school department out. But, you know, this is just too small of an operation to be assuming this large scale conversion, and the school department needs to stay committed to it for a bit longer. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Back to the school committee? Back to the superintendent?
It's really all I had tonight. I feel like I still need a little more, if I could get it from you all of, am I trying to prepare a presentation for the city council at $1.64 or less or more? And I know that I'm comfortable moving forward with the 164. I just know there's mixed feelings here, that some want to add things back and some want to keep things the way they are and retract a little bit more. So
Member Eames?
Where did the 164 come from? Is it a number that you made the budget that you extracted? Was it deductive or inductive that you got 164?
So I wouldn't say it was deducted or inductive. It's the number that we came to when if we include the $3.9 million in reductions that was proposed,
Mhm.
And some of the other shifts. So that number could move a little,
Mhm.
with like the insurance piece and waiting for the 800 up to
Mhm.
see what the down
Yeah.
does. But the $1.64, that presentation is going to happen before we have some of that information.
Mhm.
If the 164 is something you're comfortable with, I can prepare a presentation to the committee, the council with that, but I need to know if you're the boss in this one. You gotta tell me what you want me to do.
I guess I don't really know. Others of you have more history than I, so you all know something about what 164 is or means. To me, it seems like 170 would be fine, but no.
So yeah, so
Because it seems to me that this 50,000 we're talking about is 2 cents, right? So that'd be 166. So like I'm happy with 166 and the 2 nurses is probably 4 more cents. I don't know, 5 more cents. So then we're getting to 170. So I just don't know, because I don't mind paying taxes if it's going to what I value. I don't want to pay for missiles, but I do want to pay for nurses.
I would like to see, I understand this chapter 101 thing is really uncertain and will be uncertain until after we have to have a number. But I would like to see a number generated with the 800,000 added in and the potential 657,000 for the insurance, see where that lies with at least some of the 500,000 for special ed added back in and the 50,000 for store next door. And see what number that comes out to. I think that would be helpful. Member Bowden?
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see that as well. And I'd also like to see something else potentially that, and I'm going back to the administrative costs. Like, I'd like to see something that we could possibly deduct there.
Member Damon?
Well, from my perspective, I think, Member Eames and myself, we're sort of somewhat in lockstep here. I'd like to see a total budget proposal with, and I realize it's all in flux at this point, but something in the range of $1.70 as far as the mill rate is concerned. I think that is very fiscally responsible, and I think it's, when we compare it to what's going to happen on the city side, it's going to look very reasonable. And I think the other thing we have to remember is that the dollars we got last year have 90 cents worth of buying power today. The dollars that we got in 1998, which is virtually the same ask today, have 53 cents worth of buying power. Dollars are dollars or something, but we have to also remember what purchasing power those dollars actually get us. And we've seen an incredible shrinking in what those dollars are worth in the last 25 years. And in the last 2 years, even more so. So I would like to see a budget proposal. If I had my way, I'd like to go back to the original $7 million ask. Because I think that was a responsible request based on everything that we were trying to accomplish. If we're going to try to help make the city of Lewiston a better place to live. I realize that's not probably possible, but to continue to hack it up from where we are now, I can't support and I won't. And I won't be quiet about it either. So I'd like to make a motion to have the superintendent work up a budget proposal at $1.75.
Do we need a motion to do that, or can we just direct you to do that?
I don't know that we'll get there without a motion in a second, just to have a vote. But
Is there a second for that motion?
In principle, absolutely, I will second that.
Any discussion? Member Bowden, I don't know why I cannot say the right names tonight.
That's okay. In theory, I understand what you're saying, Bruce. I get it. But, we're obviously going to see a tax hike this year all around. And, we're in charge of the school budget and looking out for our kids and looking out for our teachers. And I know the city council end of it, they're in charge of looking out for every taxpayer in the city and everyone in the city, right? And we have and this is just totally different discussion, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on this, but we've got elderly people on fixed incomes who are going to not be able to afford these sort of tax hikes. And I can't support going after something that high. I'm looking at what can we do to bring the cost down more, because between everything going on in this world right now, like it's getting out of control. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to support that motion.
Just a reminder to reiterate what you just said. Our job is to do what's best for our students. And yes, we do have to take into consideration the community as a whole. But our number one task is what's best for our students. And if we create a budget that we feel is what's best for our students, and the city councilors think that their responsibility to the city means lowering it, then it's their responsibility to find ways to lower it. And that means also lowering stuff on their side. It's not our responsibility to create something to ease their burden. It's our responsibility to do what's best for our students. And that's it. And then they have the responsibility to do whatever they need to do on their end to figure out the rest. Member Eames?
I'm a senior citizen, elderly on a fixed income, just to say.
Member Beauplat?
Yeah, I've done an very informal hierarchy chart of the administration of Lewiston, and I really don't see a lot of fat on it. There's nothing I can zero in on, but it reminds me when I was a teacher in Auburn, and I'm going to get in trouble for this one, but I want to share it. I said in class one time that Auburn City Hall could disappear, saving millions of dollars of taxpayer money, and I would go along teaching and nothing would change. Little did I know that I had the daughter of the secretary to the superintendent in class, and I got a letter in my file on that one. Since becoming on the school board, I see things in a totally different light. I see the wonderful job that people are doing from top down. So to make a long story short, Member Bowden, I don't see a whole lot where we could cut on that. I mean, it's kind of good. You see, it doesn't affect direct instruction, but it sets the tone for what's going on. So I just want to throw that out there with a lot of respect to you.
Member Whitlow?
Thank you. I know that Mr. Damon has always been a big advocate for getting our budget to where it needs to be. And he's the number guy, right? Like we always look to him for like throwing out numbers. We have no idea what it means half of the time, but we respect you. We know that you're the number guy. So it's easy for me to like want to just follow your lead and be like, oh, that's exactly what we need to do. I think, the 75, was it $1.75 increase is a little bit more than that we should probably go for. But I mean, I'd support the 170. It's probably very clear by the conversation tonight that the city council is gonna balk at that, but we can see, like there's nothing wrong with presenting and saying, these are our needs. These are strong needs. And we support it. And if the city council wants to be the bad guys and gals, then they can be the bad guys and gals, right? It'll just be another story in the papers and that is what it is, right? Like, but we know what our needs are. So I'm in support of a little higher than what you're presenting. And we can let city council come back and say, this is what you guys got to do. It happens every year. Well, a lot of times. So.
Remember, Damon?
Yeah, I think my rationale for the $1.75 really a lot of it hinges back on that $500,000 in the special ed budget. If we don't have that in there, I'm very concerned, particularly with this 101 deal that is out there, that we would end up short. Over the years, the school district managed to get involved with the Department of Justice, and there are things that we must do. And the only way you can do those things that you're required to do is to have the resources available to do it. And I take these decisions very seriously. I'm a senior citizen as well. I care deeply about Lewiston is my adopted city. I was born and brought up on the other side of the river. I'll openly own it. I'm glad I'm able to serve here. I'm glad that people have felt that have provided some service to the citizens here. And I don't tend to give up on it at this point. But when I look at there's been this, fixation for years that the mill rate couldn't exceed $30 over and over and over again. You got to cut your budget because we've got to stay under $30. We've got to stay under $30. 2 years ago, after they cut our budget so that they could stay under $30, then they pulled some hijinks about that transformer plant from the CMP plan, which, suddenly now we're down below $30 again. Well, that didn't happen, and that still may not happen. And they're looking at adding $4 to $5 to the mill rate, and they're going to blow the $30 all out of the water, regardless of what they do, because contractually they can't break those employment agreements. So there's no reason we shouldn't be able to make the case that we have the same constraints with our contract bargaining agreements, and that this is the funding that's necessary to meet our obligations to our employees and to the citizens of Lewiston. And if we add $1.75 and they add $3.50, their budget is half of ours. And they 400 employees on the city side, 1,400 on the school side, something like that. And we're adding less than half of the ask to the new mill rate. Come on, folks, let's be reasonable. And everybody's affected by the inflationary pressures we're under. I can't see us not trying to at least ensure the fact that there's some at least, we had talked about trying to have maybe a reserve in there to pick up that $500,000. Well, it has to be in there somewhere. If we don't have it in the ask, we can't go back for it.
Member Heard.
Thank you. So I know committee members have said like they don't feel comfortable with taking that out and they would really like to see that put back in. But also too, like, we aren't the ones that look at the numbers every day. We aren't the ones that deal with the billing. We aren't the ones that are knee deep in it all the time. So I put my faith in Jake that he knows what he's talking about. And if he feels comfortable in that, then I trust his judgment. And I don't know if Kirsten, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but also like, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts on it? Because you're the one that's in it all day long and you're seeing the billing and you're seeing the students. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot. So if you don't want to talk on it, that's fine too. But I'm more of what I'm saying is we can sit here and say like, we don't feel comfortable taking it out or we would really like it put back in. But in reality, we don't even know like the day to day and like what's going on. And that's your area expertise. That's Kirsten, that's your area expertise. So if you're comfortable with it, then I think we kind of need to listen to what you're saying.
Procedurally, we have a motion on the table, so we can continue this discussion, but I think we need to vote on the motion before we go off topic to that. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Yeah.
175.
Opposed? 4, 2, 3 opposed. 4, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 to 4. Sorry, I can't count. I can't say names. I can't do anything. Thank you. So that fails.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Is there another?
Is there another motion? Member
Yes.
Eames?
I'll make a motion, which is sort of my original motion, which is 170. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Did you want to continue with your question, Ms. Heard?
I just want to make sure I say out loud real quickly so what that means is me and the team will start to prepare. We'll share more detail with you on Monday, but we'll start to prepare for the city council meeting that's coming up soon with a $1.70 mill rate adjustment.
With the other
And we'll
pieces.
get
all
you
of
the
the
other,
pieces
yes, we'll
in
get you
it.
the other
Yeah,
details.
It's all in it.
And if it's okay, in the past, what we've done is we put the options together for you. And I'm in my head right now, I'm thinking 4 options, at least 3. One being with the state subsidy adjustment and the insurance savings. One being the insurance adjustment, the insurance savings, and here's hoping chapter 101 doesn't pass the way it's written, but it feels like it may. And then one with some additions of things that we think, whether it's a reduction or movement, things that you've brought up already. And some things that administrators have also said, what if we put that back and package those so you can see them all laid out? Is there another grouping that you'd like to see with that?
Member Popelant?
No, I think you hit it, but I'm just wondering how are we prioritizing? Is there a tier? Are we saying the store next door and then the nurses, or the nurses, then the store next door? Or
I think with the $1.70, I'll be able to bring something to you that includes those pieces. I picked up on that. And also the district office piece, I think is something that I think as time elapses, I'll be able to bring back something connected to that too.
Member Bowden?
Thanks. I guess the grouping I'm looking for, so when I saw the $800,000 coming back to us, like I got excited, like, oh, that's great. So we can add that to the budget. And I'm curious, with all the reductions that you brought us originally and the insurance savings and that 800,000, what does that look like? With all the cuts, with the 50,000 gone, with like, I'm just curious, like, to bring down the budget, what would that look like? What is that number? Because to me, that's the most fiscally responsible, but I'd love to see it.
Any other requests? I have one question that occurred to me a little while ago, but we were in all of this. With the, I think you said like 12 or 13% increase for the new contracts for Lewiston PD. I know that our budget funds our school resource officers. Are we seeing an increase in those expenses because of their contract increase as well? And if we are, what is that costing us?
I can double check on that number. It's been essentially around $75,000 per SRO, but I can double check on actuals.
And we don't pay their benefits, right? That's paid on the city side?
I think that's why it landed as like it's a rate, but I should probably check because I know there's a percentage piece to that too. I'll get a number for us.
Member Damon?
I think one of my concerns about the $500,000 for the ELL and the special ed budget in particular is we've already been told that most of our private outplacements are going to inflict increases on us. And we still don't know what all of those are either, do we? And I mean,
Right.
can become a huge unknown. I mean, we're already talking that outplacement is in excess of $6 million. Kristen, is it outplacement about $6 million? 10.
With transportation, with transportation, it costs about 10. And I just, because we're on the topic, I know member Heard asked a minute ago as we were wrapping up the motion, but we were texting each other last night when we got this email feverishly, all of us, because we were like, I don't know how we do that. This is such an irresponsible amount of timing. The number is not rational. The cost to districts is not even something I could fathom last night. I had to literally sit at my desk this morning and start looking at specific cost breakdowns, and I still don't have a full number. And when I say it's between like, I don't know, 800,000 and $1.5 million, I mean it. It's that big of a what if. So we I don't want to say we're in a little bit of a panic, but we were legitimately, we worked really hard in this budget, going all the way back to December, even trying to forecast then what might be tolerable in our community and guessing on subsidy. Having that come through last night with a 10-day window was unimaginable. And so it's, Kirsten, you're welcome to go to the podium and share how you feel about it or what the actuals, in your mind might be, but it is a very real, very scary thing if they make this rule change.
I know that you have a sense of when surprises like similar to this pop up, you sort of have a sense of how likely they are to proceed. What is your feeling on that?
The way this is being done, it feels very possible to just happen. And I think the reason I say that, kind of reading the tea leaves, is the way in which it's been unfolded. The fact that they're using emergency language changes all the rules around due process. And it's left me very concerned that this will in fact happen. And I started going to places different from like, okay, if you set your rates and the state mandates is paid in full, regardless of attendance, that's monopoly. Do we start pulling kids if they're not attending? And that puts us in a slippery slope, because if a kid's not attending, but they require services, what does that mean for us? The implications to this are huge.
She already recognized me.
Member Eames had her hand raised. I nodded. So, sorry. Go ahead, Member Eames.
I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to the motivation for this, because I don't even understand like what they think they're doing. They must think they're doing something right. What is it?
I mean, I think a big piece is it's also difficult for special purpose private schools who have kids who just don't attend or have erratic attendance to maintain a budget on their side. So there's some rationale to the other side of things. I looked at it from a fiscal and dynamic of fiscal responsibility perspective, and I just couldn't. It took
I
me
think
a
I
day
can
to
answer that
process.
one, actually. So last year around this time, there was a motion that was put into place, like a memo from the DOE saying that stay put for special purpose private schools would be put into place. So what was happening was when students weren't attending, they were being dismissed, which puts the district in a really bad position because we need to provide FAPE and we don't have any place to put them. But they also need the money. The DOE could not enforce that. So I think this is the means to make sure that the special purpose private schools are getting their money so that they can continue on. But for a district our size, it's extremely difficult. I mean, there are some districts that have just a handful of kids outplaced. So our district's massive and it's a huge burden.
Member Heard?
Thank you. So if we were to remove the 500 that you had proposed, the 500,000 from the budget that you had proposed, and then this comes out, wouldn't we technically be ahead 500,000 because we had already taken that money?
No, it's the opposite. We would be staring right in the face of underfunding what we already knew we might have by 500,000 and then absorbing this new potentially 8 to $1.5 million on top of the 500,000. This is a $2 million conversation. That's the gravity of this for me anyway.
But didn't you say the 500,000 is of students that are on a wait list that potentially couldn't find placement anyway?
Right. But the cost difference of students attending or getting full tuition every day is that big.
I think too, the 500 to 1 million was because the tuition costs were raised in January, February this year. And some of them are quite high, like $50 per day per student, depending on the school. Some are like $25 per day per student per school. So when you have 113 kids, it's a lot of money. So that's why we wanted to take and add the 1 million. That's what we projected, but felt like we could go down to 500 and be safe. But then now this 800 is throwing a little wrench in there.
I know that this isn't a solution now or in the very near future, but is this indicative that we need to like start working with our state reps on finding a different way to fund special purpose private schools, and so that this isn't such an issue moving forward? Is there an alternative way that could happen?
So from, I guess from my seat, yes, in short. The other thing that plays into this too is, the main care seed money that we pay out for students that are outplaced. It's just this weird mechanism of the district's pay, and then the state is doing this thing with subsidy. Outplaced schools get to set their rates. I actually want to explore what the parameters are on that. There's different theories out there that some it's a percentage cap, like you can inflate your cost X amount per year. Some things thought that it might have been a dollar cost. I truly don't know. But either way, there's the ability for a special purpose private school to say, our rates have changed and we don't get a say in the matter. So that's a piece. But to your question, considering all that and the idea that subsidy comes to Lewiston, we then pay that bill, and then the state subsidizes us on a cycle of reimbursement. I'd say cut out the middleman. If we know through an IEP process that students need this level of service, then do it that way. But maybe that's too simple, and I'm sure there's a number of other factors, including geography and transportation and rate of cost in a certain community versus others. But I feel like there could be a metric figured out. It's definitely a lot to wrap my head around.
Any further questions for? Well, she's at the
Me?
podium. No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
I think between the motion at $1.70 and outlining those pieces, I feel like I have in front of me what I'd like to get to you for Monday night as part of our conversation for the regular meeting.
Meeting, yes. Think we're good with this subject. The next item on the agenda is to enter into executive session on a legal matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056E. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? School committee is in executive session at 7:36 PM.